These Samsung Tab S9 tablets released a little over 2 years ago. At the time, they commanded flagship prices. The 11-inch S9 came in at $799, the 12.4-inch S9 Plus started at $999, and the 14.6-inch S9 Ultra started at $1149. Now at the end of 2025, I think that these tablets are the best value for Android gaming. So let's define what best value means. In this case, from the perspective of a gaming enthusiast that does a lot of large handheld Android tablet gaming, that's going to mean the lowest price for the most performance. Now, I personally consider performance to be the screen size, the processor, GPU in the tablet, as well as other factors like weight, storage, and some accessories. In this video, we're going to compare the S9 tablets against some of the more recently released tablets this and last year, namely those from Lenovo, OnePlus, and recent Samsung offerings. I spent some time looking at the current market prices through online marketplaces like Reddit, eBay, and Amazon. The 11-inch S9 has been going for about $350 on Reddit. On eBay, it's been averaging about $430. And on Amazon, you can get it for about $460. The S9 Plus starts at $420 on Reddit, $460 on eBay, and finally $490 on Amazon. Lastly, the 14.6 S9 Ultra starts at $520 on Reddit, $535 on eBay, and $575 up to $700 on Amazon for the 1 terabyte, 16 gigabyte configuration. First off, let's talk about why I think the S9 line is special. 2 years ago, high flagship premium prices. It's come down the depreciation curve, and now you're looking at prices within the mid-range of newer tablets. The S9 tablets all have OLED screens, 120 Hz refresh rate, a Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 CPU with the Adreno 740 GPU. They all have micro SD slots, the S Pen, great for productivity, battery life that lasts for between 6 to 7 hours when it comes to gaming, media consumptions, 7 to 8 hours of productivity and light general browsing. The weight starts at a little under 500 grams up to 730 grams for the larger 14.6-inch S9 Ultra. They launch with Android 13, committed to 4 years of OS upgrades, 5 years of security fixes. So we are on Android 16 now, probably gonna get Android 17 next year, as well as an additional year after that of security updates. Got a 13 megapixel camera on the back, 12 megapixel on the front. The S9 Plus and the Ultra have an additional 8 megapixel ultra wide camera, and the S9 Ultra has an additional front-facing 12 megapixel ultra wide. They all have 4 speakers tuned by AKG, and they have Type-C 3.2, 45 watt charging, as well as video out. In terms of similar tablets to the 11-inch form factor, there aren't as many. We're talking about Samsung's equivalent offerings, the S10 Fan Edition and the S10 Lite, both of which comes with a 10.9-inch IPS screen, 90 Hertz. In fact, the S10 Lite uses a TFT, not even an IPS panel. The 12.4-inch S9 Plus probably has the most competition. Similarly sized tablets starts with the Lenovo Idea Pad Pro. It is a 12.7-inch, is equipped with 8 gigabytes of RAM and ranges from 120 gigabytes to 256 gigabytes. So far as storage goes, that's very similar to the S9 11-inch offerings. The S9 Plus starts at 256 gigabytes of storage and has a model that's 512 gigabytes as well, and it has 12 gigabytes of RAM. As far as S9 Plus is concerned, more RAM, more storage. The benefit of the Idea Pad Pro is we're talking about $260 right now at 33% off on Lenovo's website due to probably Black Friday or Cyber Monday promotions. Looking at the higher spec hard drive 256 gig version, that's currently retailing at $400. As I mentioned earlier, on Reddit, you get the S9 Plus has been selling for as low as $420, and on eBay, about a $50 premium on top of that. So it is more expensive than the Idea Tab Pro, but what you're getting is much better screen and much better specs in terms of the hard drive and RAM configurations for this price point. Lastly, the chips that's powering the Lenovo Idea Tab Pro. It is a MediaTek Dimensity 8300, which uses the Mali G615 GPU. It's the same 4nm chip, released in a similar year. However, when we're talking about high-end gaming, both tablets are able to play AAA native Android games like Genshin Impact, Honkai Star Rail, Wuthering Waves, with similar performance, although the Snapdragon 8 Gen 2 does edge it out a little bit in terms of sheer performance. Lastly, when it comes to emulation gaming, the 8 Gen 2 benefits from a much wider emulation driver compatibility thanks to Mesa Turner drivers. So if you're someone that really does a lot of 6th generation consoles like the Switch, or see to playing your Steam library on the tablet, it's highly recommended that you get an 8 Gen 2 or better like an 8 Gen 3 for that express purpose. Another factor for storage is that both the Idea Tab Pro and the S9 line have support for micro SD cards. So that's great for storing additional media or files, or if you're playing a lot of emulation games, ROMs, etc. Especially if you're looking into emulating PC games through Steam, a lot of these modern day games are 20, 40, 60 gigabytes large. That's going to fill up the storage size pretty quickly. So you're definitely gonna want some extra storage to offload additional files to. So the next tablet we have to compare the S9 Plus with is the Lenovo Yoga Pad Plus. It's a 12.7-inch IPS paneled tablet. Price on Lenovo's website is $460 for a 16 gigabyte, 256 gigabytes of storage configuration. The benefit of this one is that it is powered by the Snapdragon 8 Gen 3. Pure performance of hardware, of chip hardware, the Yoga Pad Plus is going to outdo the S9 Plus. It will do better frames, smoother gameplay. It still benefits from wide emulation compatibility in Switch emulation, PC, Game Hub, Game Native emulation, especially having also 16 gigabytes of RAM. That's going to help that higher end emulation, especially when it comes to PC emulation and the amount of RAM it takes for some of these higher end AAA games. So why wouldn't I ideally drive the Yoga Pad Plus versus the S9 Plus? That comes down to the screen. OLED versus IPS. True black because pixels aren't turning on versus a backlight that is going to create more of a grayish color. As you're seeing here, the OLED panel is much darker in terms of the blacks compared to the IPS. In terms of productivity, I think that IPS displays have less eye fatigue compared to an OLED display. But as far as gaming, media consumption, watching movies, TV shows, I definitely prefer doing that on the OLED screen. And at $460, even though it has the 8 Gen 3, it's more performant at 16 gigs of RAM, again, helping that performance. It doesn't have a micro SD card slot, so adding additional storage, your ROM library, media files, you're going to be severely limited by 256 gigs. That's going to fill up pretty fast. And lastly, if you're already at $460, assuming you buy it through Lenovo's website, maybe you find it a little cheaper, the S9 Ultra can be had for as low as $500. Some of the other benefits of the Yoga Pad Plus is its kickstand. The S9 Plus and really all of Samsung's tablets, they have the keyboard cover, it's fixed. So that's fine when you're sitting at a desk typing away. However, if you're standing up and you don't quite have the elevation at roughly waist to chest level, you're doing a lot of looking down at the screen, you can't bend it upwards. So it's not as flexible. Whereas the Yoga Pad Plus does have a movable hinge. One other thing to note, the backing of the Yoga Pad Plus, it's made out of glass, but it's not fully covered, is my point here. And so compared to when the S9 is folded up, right, full coverage on the back, a groove holder for your S Pen. It's protected front and back. Obviously the size aren't, but there are solutions to that. And this is the other talking point of the Samsung line and Samsung products, is there's a lot of third-party accessories. So when you talk about something like the S9 11-inch, say you're concerned about the edges being scuffed. Well, sites like SophieGuard make skins. So this back is a heat shrink wrap skin, and the sides are also wrapped. So that gives it some protection from minor scuffs. Another similarly sized tablet will be the OnePlus Pad 3. Larger display at 13.2 inches, IPS panel, 144 Hertz. It's currently retailing at $580 on Amazon, and it is powered by the Snapdragon 8 Elite. That is a 3nm chip running the Adreno 830 GPU. It is the most flagship processor for Android tablets right now until the 8 Elite Gen 5 shows up. It comes in 12 gigabytes of RAM, 256 gigabytes of storage, up to 16 gigabytes of RAM with 512 gigabytes of storage. It has 8 Dolby Atmos equipped speakers. It also has a Type-C video out. As far as why I personally wouldn't choose the OnePlus Pad 3, despite all its flagship specs at a $580 price, comes down to the screen type. That's not OLED, IPS, as I mentioned before. I do a lot of media consumption with my tablets. I do a lot of handheld gaming with my tablets. That's much more enjoyable for me personally on an OLED screen. Next thing is the chipset. 8 Elite is flagship performance. However, it does suffer from high-end emulation compatibility drivers. The Mesa turnip drivers that are available for the Gen 2, those aren't out yet for the 8 Elite. The community developers are working on it, potentially a spring release. And that means that some Switch games will either have graphical glitches or straight up won't run. On the flip side, there are some PC emulation games that actually can run on 8 Elite by its sheer brute force processing power, and that wouldn't run or crash on an Gen 2 or an Gen 3. Why I wouldn't pick the Yoga Pad Plus personally is at a $460 price point, it doesn't have an OLED screen, it doesn't have micro SD. And that's a similar problem with the OnePlus Pad 3. No micro SD slot, and you're getting worse emulation compatibility with the 8 Elite chip. There's a future out there where the 8 Elite will run circles around Gen 2s and Gen 3s. However, that is a future potential, and to pay $580 for a future potential when you have something like the S9 Ultra at the same price point and get a 14.6-inch OLED screen with excellent emulation compatibility and still solid gameplay in both emulation and native Android games, that's an easy choice for me. Lastly, I will admit that the Gen 2 has trailed a little bit in terms of Android gaming for more recently released titles like Destiny Rising. I've averaged somewhere between 40 to 50 FPS. It does stutter, it does drop. So those are the tablets I looked at within the $350 to $650 price range. There is one other accessory I like to showcase as far as game emulation and gaming goes. This here is the GameSir G8 telescopic controller, and it has the extended mod done to it to allow for extra wide tablet connectivity. Type-C, this particular version was professionally modded by Ricardo from the RRtronics Creations website. I'll have a link down below for those interested. Now, if you're someone that does local game streaming using Apollo, Artemis, or Moonlight, or if you're someone that game streams using something like GeForce Now, you owe it to yourself to try large screen OLED handheld gaming on an 11-inch, 12.4-inch, or 14.6-inch. So to recap, why I still daily the Samsung S9 OLED screen, a wide variety of sizes to choose from, high portability, high immersion, while the price goes from $350 up to $650. that does land in similar price points as tablets released this year that don't quite have the same feature set. Other things like micro SD, large batteries, ability to have Type-C video out, S Pen for additional productivity, as well as a wide range of accessories. So what do you think? Are there any tablets that I didn't consider that should have made this list? Please let me know in the comments below. And if you made it to the very end of this video, thank you very much. If you liked it, please thumbs up and subscribe for future content. And I'll see you in the next video.